Hello, testing. Hello, this is Joseph Holbrook. Tonight we're going to talk about governments of the world. We're beginning our section on government in Introduction to Social Sciences. So let's begin with governments of the world. We start out with, say, the government of France. A little bit of historical background. The book affirms that democracy was born there. I don't entirely agree with that. I would have to also point to ancient Greece as well as the U.S. Republic as sources of democracy in addition to France. The French Revolution happened 1789 to 1799. It was an uprising of the common people against an unresponsive monarchy and aristocracy. An important national holiday for the French is July 14th, which is Bastille Day. Bastille was a prison, and the French middle classes and peasants stormed Bastille to get weapons in order to fight against the French soldiers serving the king. There was a decade of chaos and terror in the revolution. Napoleon seized control eventually and returned to an autocracy as opposed to a democracy. An autocracy is the rule by one authoritarian person. And there was a gradual change through the 19th century to a liberal parliamentary system in France. Also, a significant event in the establishment of modern democratic France was the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. This led to a sense of patriotism and a sense of Frenchness, a citizenship. France has had many different versions of their constitution. The French Revolution issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which is somewhat analogous to our own Declaration of Independence in the United States. Laws are seen as technical rules, but not absolute. The Fifth Republic was established in 1958. In modern French government, what you have is a parliamentary democracy, as opposed to our system, which is presidential. It includes two legislative houses, a National Assembly, which is the result of direct elections, and a Senate, which is chosen by an electoral college. The executive branch may also legislate. The President of France is the head of state, and the Prime Minister is appointed by the President and is the chief executive. Here is a picture of modern France. You see Spain below it. Great Britain is across the channel, and Germany. And so now we go across to the New World to see the government of Mexico. Mexico won its independence from Spain in 1821. It had been a colonial province of Spain ruled by a viceroy or a vice king. It was a monarchy first for a few short years and then became a republic. The Mexican-American War intervened in the history of Mexico in 1848, and Mexico lost half of its territory to the United States. Most of what we know as the modern U.S. Southwest at one time belonged to Mexico. It led to the Mexican Civil War between conservatives and liberals, and then France attempted to annex Mexico as part of France. Of course, the Mexicans didn't like that very much, and so some more war ensued. And the Mexicans eventually defeated the French and won their independence in 1867. Porfirio Diaz took over after Benito Juarez. Benito Juarez had been a Zapotec, full-blooded Zapotec Indian who rose to be president of Mexico, and he was the hero of the war against the French. His protege, Porfirio Diaz, took over and became a liberal dictator and ruled in what's called the Porfiriato from the 1870s through about 1910. Social unrest grew during the Porfiriato, resulting in a revolution beginning around 1910, 1912, 1913. Eventually, a new constitution was written in 1917, and a federal republic was established. It was a very socially sensitive document, the Constitution that was written. Social concerns were a focus of the government. They had a strong central president, almost a dictator, and the revolutionary party that came out of the Mexican Revolution was called the PRI, or the Institutional Revolutionary Party, and it controlled Mexican politics for 70 years. Modern Mexico is moving towards greater levels of democracy. It underwent a good deal of modernization in the 1980s, 1990s. There were financial and social reforms and electoral, judicial reforms. In the elections of 2006, the PRI finally lost power, and a more conservative party, the PAN, was elected. They used mass media and American-style campaigns, and the election was accepted as legitimate by all. The Mexican flag. And here's a picture of modern Mexico. So now we go back across the water to Africa, and we talk about the government of Nigeria. Nigeria has tribal foundations. The Muslims control in the north and the Christian tribes in the south. It was under British occupation. It began during slave trade and grew in influence. The British ruled 3 regions of Nigeria, and they organized it regionally: Lagos, the Niger Coast, and the Northern Protectorate. The Protectorate of Nigeria lasted into the early 20th century. There was colonization and combined with Christian missionary work, and it was ruled by a lieutenant governor who was loyal to Great Britain. In the history of Nigeria, the southern part of Nigeria dominated the entire country, and it was primarily Christian. And then there was a growing nationalist movement. Nigeria finally gained its independence in 1960, and it developed a republican parliamentary system. There was a constant political upheaval, and there was continual military coups from 1966 to about 1983. A more stable democracy emerged after 1999. Some violence and civil unrest. The primary party was the People's Democratic Party, which was elected in 2007. There are still current conflicts, both religious as well as regional. There are diverse cultural regions and oil wealth that creates competition, and the colonial legacy still affects the government. The government at both the national and the regional levels has a president, legislative, and executive branches, a legal system based on English common law, and also Sharia in the Muslim areas. It operates with political parties. And here is a picture of modern Nigeria. Now we go to Russia. The Russian Empire was an autocracy, or an authoritarian system ruled by czars. The word czar is the Russian word for Caesar. There was a revolution in 1917 at the end of the First World War. It's called the Russian Revolution. It was led by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Party. They established the USSR, which is the Soviet Socialist Republics. It was controlled by the Communist Party and ruled for about 60 years. Was rather anti-religious. It was a communist atheist dictatorship. Mikhail Gorbachev became president of Russia and attempted reforms in the 1980s. There was an attempt to overthrow him in 1991 in a coup attempt, and this was basically the effective end of the USSR as new republics emerged and separated from the former USSR, which returned Russia, the actual Russia, to its national existence. This is a picture of half of Russia compared to France. This is France over here. So you see how large Russia is as a country. And there's the entire modern nation of Russia. One of the largest nations in the world, if not the largest. The government of Russia which is the largest of the former Soviet republics, has a president, a Congress of People's Deputies, a Federal Assembly created in 1993. Vladimir Putin was elected in 1999, restored stability and pride. Medvedev succeeded him as the president of Russia, and Putin stayed on as prime minister. Now Putin recently has come back into the presidency and is clearly the authoritarian leader of the modern Russia. I don't know if you followed the news recently, but there's been a good deal of conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. The eastern half of Ukraine has a large percentage of ethnic Russians. The Ukrainian Revolution happened in February 2014, just a little over a year ago. Then the following month, Russia annexed Crimea, which was on the eastern part of Ukraine and is heavily dominated by ethnic Russians. In March and July 2014, a Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was inadvertently shot down over the Ukraine, probably by pro-Russian separatists. And there finally was a ceasefire put in place in February 2015, although the area continues to be a hotbed of difficulties and potential conflict. Here's a picture of the Ukraine. And this shows you here the eastern area of the Ukraine where the separatism is going on and the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. There's a lot more that could be said about that. But moving on to our last country, the government of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a collection of tribes following Islamic traditions. Before the 20th century, it had no single leader. In the early 1900s, Ibn Saud conquered many of the tribes and extended his authority and created the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in 1932. There's a picture of Saudi Arabia. You see it's fairly large compared to Egypt. And up here is Iran. The Saudi Arabia follows the Quran as its scriptures and the historical precedent. Royal decrees are the law. It has no written constitution, no legislature, no political parties. It's based on a monarchy, which is an authoritarian monarchy. The ruler is chosen from the royal families approved by Muslim leaders. It has a council of ministers appointed by a prime minister. It has dual power base, sometimes creates tension. The government continues evolving. Saudis generally are satisfied with their government. Social protest starts to increase. Continuing conflict between Sunni, which is a strict Islamic traditionalist, and pro-Western factions. I must point out that Saudi Arabia has been accused of extensive human rights abuses. It follows an extreme form of Sunni Islam called Wahhabism, which is the same form of religion that ISIS follows. 9 people were executed by beheading in the first 2 weeks of this year. One woman was publicly beheaded without painkillers. Sometimes they give painkillers to execution people who are being executed, but they did not in her case. She was accused of abusing and killing her daughter, although she cried out to her last breath that she was innocent. A blogger, Saudi Arabian blogger named Raif Badawi, received a sentence of 1,000 lashes recently for speaking out against the Saudi Arabian government, simply speaking his freedom of expression. He now faces the death penalty. He's accused of being an apostate from Islam. So as you see, Saudi Arabia, even though there are allies, they have some very serious human rights abuses and are not very different than ISIS in many ways, although perhaps not as extreme. Well, that's a quick 15-minute whirlwind tour of 5 representative governments of the world, and I hope you'll read through the chapter and do well on the test. Thank you. Take care.